Having made the previous two Discworld adventure games, Pratchett had a bit more trust in the developers, leading to a very different third Discworld adventure. Pratchett felt like a detective game would be a good idea, and the developers suggested a film noir style could be a good fit, and Discworld Noir was born. Leaving Rincewind behind...
Well, I'll just slink off down this corridor, shall I?
They were now allowed to create a new story featuring a brand new character, Luton, the first private detective in Ankh-Morpork.
A lot of strange things had happened to me since becoming a private investigator. But the weirdest was the irrepressible sensation that the most important thing for me to own as a PI was a door with my name painted on the glass.
The cartoon style is also abandoned in favour of a style more in keeping with the noir of the title. This is Ankh-Morpork as a city of dark, rain-soaked streets and alleys. All the film noir tropes are in place, from the femme fatale walking into the detective's office to open the plot.
What can I do for you, Miss...
Mrs. Actually, and the name is Carlotta.
Okay, Mrs. Actually. Carlotta it is.
To a couple of characters who bear more than a passing resemblance to the classic pairing of Sidney Greenstreet and Peter Lorre.
I'll tell you right out. I'm a troll who likes talking to people who like to talk.
I tell you right out, I'm a man who likes talking to a man who likes to talk.
You have a bad attitude as well. That also gets you into trouble.
Now, Mr. Alcali.
The change in style also comes with a change in graphics. The backgrounds are still 2D, though drawn in a more realistic style than the earlier games, but the characters are pre-rendered in 3D. Since the game came out in 1999, the graphics have obviously dated, but they've actually held up relatively well compared to some other games of the era. The Monkey Island series went 3D a year later than this, and came out with Escape from Monkey Island looking like a horrible blocky mess even at the time. The atmosphere of the game is enhanced greatly by an excellent soundtrack that captures the jazz feel of the films that inspired the game. The instrumental tracks set the mood, while there's some well-written songs, such as the As Time Goes By stand-in for the piano player.
You can't recall if the whiskey knocked you flat, or if everything was a blur when you met her.
And the Troll Club singer, who references various club standards. And of course, a reference to one of the most famous misquoted lines in cinema history would have been more conspicuous by its absence if they didn't include it.
Play it again, Sam. You know what? No one's ever going to believe you said that.
Unlike the earlier games, Discworld Noir doesn't just throw constant jokes at the player, instead taking the time to tell a proper story with an interesting plot, and the game is all the better for it. In doing this, it captures the style of the books far better without slavishly imitating any particular novel. The voice acting this time around features the return of Rob Brydon, Kate Robbins and Nigel Planer from the previous games, with the addition of Robert Llewellyn of Red Dwarf fame. All four actors play multiple roles, with Brydon stepping up into the lead role this time around, doing a good job of playing the classic private detective part.
I've had some bad days since I started work as a private investigator, but I'd never woken up dead before.
The actors had a lot of work to put into the roles too. The developers this time have made a real effort to put customised responses for almost everything you try and everything you ask someone about, so you don't have to constantly listen to
"That doesn't work"
over and over.
I resisted the temptation to say, that doesn't work.
It's a good job that the voice acting is good and the conversation's well written too, since it's the main focus of the gameplay in Discworld Noir. There's very little in the way of traditional inventory object puzzles. Instead, as befits a detective, most of the gameplay involves talking to people and taking notes of clues, which you can then ask other people about. Though you'll be hoping not to speak to this guy too often, who makes you wait out his entire sculpting animation before answering, every single time you ask anything.
What do you know about a woman named Carlotta?
Where do I know that name from?
It wasn't hard to lose patience with Rodin. Every day probably took him by complete surprise.
You can also combine the clues to make connections between them and reveal new information.
Were Madame Lodestone and Therma the same person? I needed to know.
The developers didn't just want to make another easy license game, but were serious about making a proper detective game, and they succeeded in making one of the best of the era, putting more effort into making it feel like you're investigating than most of the more general crime adventures. It also pays homage to the detective genre outside of noir too, with the message written in blood at a murder scene arcing back as far as Sherlock Holmes' first adventure, A Study in Scarlet. In the traditions of Discworld, there's plenty of parody here too, even aside from the genre focus. The Guild of Archaeologists, Antiquarians and Tomb Evacuators has Luton meeting someone who looks rather familiar from a series of games Terry Pratchett was a fan of.
I never steal from any building less than 1,000 years old, and with really exciting puzzles.
And that more than 10 years later his daughter Rihanna would go on to write for. The game doesn't stop there though, in terms of either the plot or the gameplay. Halfway through the game, Luton himself gets turned into a werewolf. Cleverly utilising another element from the books, werewolves experience smells as vivid colours, and this is used in the game to allow you to identify earlier events and to track who has been where. Your inventory becomes a palette of smells that you can compare to the clouds of colour in the environments, providing a new way of experiencing the locations you passed through earlier. It's not completely perfect though, since some of the colours are far too similar, making them hard to distinguish and meaning you'll have to do some mouse hovering to find which ones match. I imagine that problem would be much worse for anyone with colour blindness too. It is an interesting mechanic though and keeps things fresh.
What do you want with me? I was unconscious throughout the whole incident.
We only have your word for that. You could have killed Mundy and then knocked yourself unconscious.
If there's one main flaw in terms of the writing though, it's in the portrayal of Vimes. The other occasions where characters from the books appear are quite well done, with the dialogue for death having been rewritten by Terry Pratchett himself.
You seem remarkably calm for one who's just seen the defeater of empires, the swallower of oceans, the thief of years, the ultimate reality, the harvester of mankind, and the assassin against whom no lock will hold. That's me, in case you have trouble with long sentences.
Vimes, however, seems completely out of character. Luton is a former watch member who was kicked out by Vimes for taking a bribe, and in the game he lets this hatred of Luton lead him to just assume his guilt. He just doesn't generally feel like the Vimes we know from the books, but it isn't enough to ruin the game. He's only in it briefly, and we're seeing everything through Luton's eyes, with his own grudge perhaps colouring his perception of the Watch Commander.
I don't know what happened, but somebody knocked me out, and whoever they are, they're the one you should be looking for.
Fine. If that's the way you want it, that's the way you'll get it. Give my regards to Lord Veterinary when your trial comes up.
Other than that though, the game holds up very well, even when the plot takes yet another surprise turn at the end of the game to parody Lovecraftian horror, something that seems to infect detective games relatively regularly. Discworld Noir also avoids the problem of pixel hunting for the most part, aside from one scene where they randomly expect you to find one particular brick in a darkened room to escape. There are times when you might end up having to run around talking to everyone again to find the one thing you've missed to move the plot along, but generally the gameplay is intuitive and logical, and you're unlikely to get stuck trying to figure out a random item combination the designers want you to make. Discworld Noir was a pinnacle of the Discworld game series, maybe not having quite the same depth as one of Pratchett's best books, but certainly matching the tone and humour while presenting a really enjoyable plot and an engaging mystery. It also displays an impressive knowledge and level of care about the Discworld series, with details pulled from all parts of the series. It's exactly the sort of excellent adaptation that certain people in the TV industry are sadly showing they're not capable of making at the moment.
Sorry, you know how it is. Some people are stupid enough to fall for that sort of thing.
Unfortunately, along with the previous two graphical adventures, Discworld Noir is no longer available to buy. There's issues with the copyright, where the companies that owned the rights to the games were bought and sold and held by companies that closed down so many times that nobody knows where the rights to the games actually are anymore, which means it's unlikely we're going to get a re-release anytime in the foreseeable future.
That doesn't seem fair.
Even getting the old original discs running to replay the game for this video involved a lot of messing around with installing old versions of Windows into virtual PC software. For fans of Terry Pratchett though, as well as fans of classic adventure and detective games, it's well worth the effort if you're able to get hold of a copy. And it can be nice to go back to a time when copy protection could just be a few jokey lines in the manual, or even a time when games actually came with a manual. With the closure of developers Perfect Entertainment shortly after its release, the game brought an end to the Discworld series on PC. There would be just one more attempt to bring Pratchett's world to the realm of gaming a few years later, but in a more portable but less ambitious format, which I'll leave for the final video of this series. I'll leave you now with one of the many characters played by Mr. Rob Brydon.
All that you remember are the tunes of a vampire, a melancholy tune about impending doom. I'll fetch your tankard, fill it to the brim, a cask of stale, broken drum ale, wondering how long till you meet again on the bed.